Big 550 KTRS portion has ended, and Santiago and I are back to look at answer some listener questions, answer some Twitter follower questions we had, and I want to talk a little bit more about some of the overall expectations that St. Louis City has. And goodness, Santi, with the week we've had, I think we have to get into that soccer capital discussion. And I
Yeah.
see your eyes. I see your eyes rolling already into the back of your head with how ridiculous this has been. So we'll save that one. We'll save that one for a little bit later once we get a little into our Q&As that we have going on. So, yeah, and thank you to everybody who reached out and gave us some good questions. I did not run these by Santi beforehand, so we're going to get kind of a just a little honest answers with no predication to it. So the first one, and this is a softball, so to speak, Santi. Robbie had a fun question. How many soccer balls do you think it would take to fill City Park? Let's start it off with that one.
How many soccer
How many
balls?
soccer balls? I have no idea what fill City Park means, whether it's filling the field up,
Right.
filling the seats, literally packing it from the ground to the roof. How big do you think the park is?
Um. Okay. I'm gonna go 40,000.
40,000. I'm just gonna go like 100,000. Just I don't know what we're filling here, but that seems like a good number.
All right.
Joe's got a few questions here, and he had some good questions last week. Joe Flies X Wings on Twitter. He goes, as much as I love 4-0, the big impact is the validation of Lutz, Carnell, and staff's plans, and the message it sends to the academy players, potential signings, and regional talent. Come to St. Louis City, we know what we're doing. He's so excited for the future. I think that's spot on. It says a lot to the system and the culture that they're building from the bottom up, because, like we've talked about ad nauseum here, they started with the academy. They started from the bottom of the pyramid and worked their way up in hiring, in recruitment, and just in start time. And so when you're able to tout the success of what you've built in that manner, it's almost like saying, we were successful at the path we're offering you. It's like looking at
Mm-hmm.
Miguel Perez, saying we were successful in developing players like Perez and Caden Glover into who started in the academy and worked their way up in this short period of time. If you work hard enough, this can and should be you, in addition to all the on-field success that they've had at just about every level.
Yeah, and if you go up a level, then you have Kyle Hibbert, who basically played every minute but five last season with CD2, and this year he played every game with CDSC, and now he has been called up to the Canadian national team. And besides Hibbert, you have Akil Watts,
Yep.
Celio Pompeo. Josh Jar also got some minutes, even though he already had some MLS experience. But you're seeing from academy to CD2, from CD2 to City, and that's only in 2 years. So yeah, you are showing that the model works, and I'm sure in the next few years we will see more kids from St. Louis making it to CD2, CDSC,
Yep.
and uh, CD2 is starting this weekend. We will probably see a lot of the academy kids getting minutes. So that's great.
Yeah, what do you think? We didn't touch on that on the KTRS part, but what do you think about City 2 this weekend? What should we expect going into that? Because from my perspective, based on the preseason match that they had at SLU, I'm expecting a combination of players that are signed directly to City 2, who the roster's out there on the app, on the website, so you can take a look at that, but also some of the players who don't see minutes against RSL, or maybe don't even make the game day roster. Potentially some players like an Akil Watts, like an Azeel Jackson, Owen O'Malley, Caden Glover, those kinds of players who, yeah, they're rostered with City, but they've been seeing a lot of time in practice with City too. They played against SLU. I'm expecting to see a pretty decent mix. I also wouldn't be surprised if we saw Michael Creek in net. I have no idea how the goalkeeping situation has been with the City 2 signed players, including Eric Walker, who we know from last year. But Michael Creek is another one of those players who has an MLS contract as the third keeper. So do you use him and use City 2 to get him minutes to keep sharp if and when he's called upon for City, or do you leverage some of those keepers that City 2 have signed directly?
Yeah, for the goal on the goalkeeper specifically, I think I will go with Eric Walker or somebody like, yeah, Michael Crick. Yeah, it's great, and he had a good season with City too, and now he was rewarded with a contract. But if you are thinking about, okay, City two are gonna give some kids some opportunities, maybe Crick will be a goalkeeper sometimes, but at the same time you have to continue developing. And obviously Eric Walker got injured last year,
Yep.
but you need to start giving him minutes. He has to regain confidence and see he could be one of your goalkeepers of the future. But to your point, we will see a combination of academy players and some of the players that don't get minutes with City. And Carnell has mentioned that multiple times, that on Sundays he will, and players that don't make the game the lineup, or maybe they're on the bench and don't play, they will probably see minutes with City too. And it could be one of those things. Maybe some of them will see minutes, but won't play 90 minutes. Maybe they will play one half, and then you bring some of the kids in. But it'd be great to see that combination of very young players from the academy system mixing with some of the players from City, and then you have Juan Hussein, Alex Palazzolo, the guys that had that experience with City too, and that should be the guys leading this team. So I think it'll be great. It'll be exciting. I don't think we're gonna have a championship season again. That's not really the goal. Now the goal shifts to development.
Purely, yep.
So yeah, so but yeah, it'll be great to see some of the academy kids going against either other players from other academies or players also on this path to pro with other teams.
Yeah, and you mentioned AJ Palazzolo, so John Klein is another player who got a City 2
Yeah,
contract after we drafted him. So it'll be fun to see those two back together in the midfield. And I think this will be a good first test for this revamped City 2 team. It's an entirely different mindset, like you said, entirely different team with a few of those stalwarts that remain. But it's a Tacoma Defiance team that, of any team in MLS, their two team is historically competitive. So Tacoma obviously provided a, a good back and forth for us last year. They were fighting with us at the top of the Western Conference the entire year. And regardless of how, if we expect to go far or reach the playoffs, or from a team competitive perspective, I think the system is still going to be at play in City 2. And so I would hope that we still could see somewhat of a continued success, whether it is a Western Conference championship level or not, winning record, making the playoffs, those kinds of things. I think you want to see your two teams succeed in that manner, not just because you want to have a trophy, but because it is a good indicator of the system's success. It's a good indicator of players adapting and buying into that system and performing well in it, because if they don't, then we're not going to see many graduate or be offered MLS contracts. It's still a pipeline that you want to see continue. And in order to be confident in that, you need to see the system continue to work as much as your individual contributions.
yeah, and when I said it may not be a championship season, I'm still counting on maybe some playoffs,
Yeah.
or as you said, winning record, and getting some guys promoted to City next year, or at least signing a homegrown contract, even if they had to spend another year with City too. It'll be great to see that progression to continue.
Yep. So the game is 5 o'clock at City Park on Sunday. So after watching City late into the evening with that 8:30 p.m. Central start time on Saturday, that'll be a nice kind of cap to the weekend. And for anybody going, I think it'll be a lot more low key than the City 2 matches last year. I think it'll be an enjoyable experience to be into the stadium. If you haven't been to the stadium, this is the perfect opportunity to do so. Tickets, if you didn't buy the season ticket, they're still fairly cheap, 10 to $15, I think, 10 or $13. I saw a couple different prices.
Yeah, it's $13. At least that's what I saw. $13, and the season ticket is
Yeah, it's like
$105.
$8 a game or something.
Right.
And in, as full up as the wait list, as the deposit list was, for a lot of people, it's wanting to see the inside of that stadium, get in and experience it. This is your chance for, less than $15, no matter how you look at it. It's 5 o'clock on a Sunday. Most matches are at 5 o'clock on Sunday. And you can have that experience in the stadium. You can also look forward to, like we said, some city players. So a lot of cool things with City 2 that I hope to see people continue to be excited to watch that team, because as much as we always tout the academy as the next generation, this is that stepping stone. So it's the next generation that you could see very quickly with the first team. So looking back at the questions, this all came from some of the questions. So one of the other questions that Joe had is, with the current form of the MLS teams in our region, is it out of the question for this team to invest in a deep run in the U.S. Open Cup? Trying not to get too far ahead of myself, but why not go all in, trying to get to the quarterfinals and see what happens? Which is timely. I mean, the U.S. Open Cup first round just kicked off this week. I couldn't figure out how to watch a single match, but it kicked off this week.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what do you think? Deep run in the Open Cup? How do you want to see us approach the Open Cup when we actually do enter it?
Well, I don't know. I'm not sure how I feel about deep run. I think I want the team to take it seriously and have a combination of starters and maybe players that don't get a lot of minutes. But the thing with having a deep run is that then you start getting into a congested schedule,
Yep.
and even though the team has a great system, I think the amount of games could take a toll, and especially with the team the way it started the season, I
Yeah.
just don't think having a deep run will be the most convenient thing. But they always want to win, and I think the team will approach it that way. Like if we get into a deep run, we will figure out a way to handle it. But I don't know. From my standpoint, no.
See, this is where having Phil or Stu on to wax poetic about the U.S. Open Cup would come in handy. I'll do my best, but I'm of the same opinion that you are. And it is because there's so much going on this year, and it's not that I don't want to prioritize the best tournament that the country has with regards to this sport, and possibly the best tournament in general that they have, but it's the fact that in order to prioritize the US Open Cup, you have to give your best 11 at that point in time going into it. And you're talking about what's going to end up being a midweek match, so that if you truly want to go all in, you need to not just prepare beforehand. So that we're talking the weekend before, you're more or less punting an MLS week by ensuring that everybody who we see now, it's not going to be Nilsson's not going to be in there, but you're assuming every single best 11 is going to need to be 100% fit, ready to go for that midweek match in the US Open Cup. So you play them 45 minutes, you play them 30, 60, something like that, assuming that you play them at all, but you're also going to toss in maybe an Owen O'Malley, maybe you're going to toss in Akil Watts, Celio Pompeu to start these matches in MLS if you're going to focus on the US Open Cup. That's prepping for it. And then you look to do the exact same thing on the backside, because these players are not going to be fully fit to play an MLS match 3 days later. So you're going to
Hmm.
be dealing with tired legs. You're going to be dealing with fatigue. And so that's essentially 2 weeks of an MLS season that you're not going in at 100%. And yes, we've bought ourselves some a nice head start going into the season, but a season could unravel quickly. And
Yeah.
if your teams go on streaks for reasons, they go in and out of form. That to me is a recipe for going out of form. And there's no guarantees that you'd win the US Open Cup with that kind of a team. You would hope going against what I assume would be a USL championship side that our best 11 will come out on top. But that also goes to me of what is a deep run and how long are you willing to do this? Because we go into I think it's the third round that we enter. And
Hmm.
if we enter in the third round, you're looking at what, 4 matches to get to the championship, right? Third, fourth.
Or maybe
It's either
five.
four or
Yeah.
five. 4 or 5 matches to win it all. And I don't see any value in going for it all if your goal is to reach the quarterfinals, because that was part of the question. To me, if you're looking to make a deep run, you're looking to commit to winning the whole thing, or you're gonna punt it from the beginning. And if you're not willing to if you're willing to commit to the entire run, that's a whole lot of MLS matches that you're going to deprioritize. And so you're taking a huge gamble that you're going to make it to the finals, or you're going to have a trophy at the end of the season. Otherwise, you've squandered a lot of what this season has started as. And I don't want to take that risk. So the long-winded way of saying I agree with you, I just don't see the way we've started in this MLS season. If we had started completely different, if we had started 0-4, then I would probably be of a different mindset that, okay, MLS season's kind of a lost cause, it seems already. Like
Right.
something's gone wrong. Why not go all in on the US Open Cup? But with what we're seeing in the MLS season, there's too much opportunity, too much potential for really good things to happen in this long season for you to be prioritizing midweek matches, even if it is in the best tournament in the country.
Yeah, and then you also have Open Cup. I'm not Open Cup, Leagues
Leagues
Cup
Cup, yeah.
that you also have to prepare for. And even though the league stops during that time frame, still one more tournament to think about, additional games to
Yep.
play. So so yeah, even though we all like the Open Cup and have great memories from what St. Louis teams have done in the last few years, I just don't think prioritizing a deep run is the best is in the best interest for this year.
And that's probably something St. Louis fans aren't going to want to hear just because of our history with the Open Cup. But I definitely think it's a reality that we need to think through. And to Ashley Sell asked a question in the chat: does the City 2 team play in the Open Cup too? This year they do not. The Open Cup allows teams at the top of their organization to join or to participate. Last year, City 2 was in because they were the pinnacle team in our system. But this year, with St. Louis City existing, City 2 will not participate. And I think we'll roll out a team that will have a lot of people you'll see on City 2 throughout the year, but it will be City proper representing us.
What
All
else do
right.
you
So
have?
yeah, and we'll circle back to the Open Cup when we get a matchup and when we start seeing when that becomes a little more of a clear picture going forward. The last one is: do you anticipate any changes to the formation or intensity of the press playing in altitude? And this one comes from Toddy B.
That's a great question, and we didn't
It
get
is.
much into that, but
Let's go.
when
Let's get that deep.
yeah, but when I asked Carnell about that today, and he basically said no, like we were not doing anything different. We went there with CD2 last year, and basically the way you handle it so it doesn't have a huge impact is you arrive to the city like as close as possible to game time. That way it doesn't have a huge impact. But at the same time, I'm just thinking, going back to the conversation I had with the RSL podcast this week. One thing they mentioned is, because I asked them about, hey, what's the impact of the altitude? What have you seen from other teams? And one thing they mentioned, and obviously we run out of time for the KTRS portion, but I was dying to when you mentioned Joaquini coming into like the 70th minute with fresh legs. I think that's the way City will handle it. But what these guys mentioned was that you see a lot of goals scored like in the last 20 minutes of the game,
Hmm.
and it is a result of the visiting team like basically getting tired, heavy legs, running out of air. But if you bring fresh legs, if you bring Nico Joachini, Celio Pompeo, um, you can overcome those heavy legs and maybe thin air in Salt Lake. So And Bradley Carnell also basically downplayed it and said, no, we don't really think about that. We just arrived the day before and we had success with CD2 last year. So I don't think it's going to be a huge impact, and City will make some of those late substitutions to get some fresh legs and get anybody
Yeah.
who is tired out of the game.
I definitely don't think we're going to change our style to try and fit the altitude.
Right.
I definitely don't see any difference that we're going to approach as far as our press and our willingness to kind of swarm those players. But the one thing that I do kind of worry about or wonder about, to your point of fresh legs in the second half, is our depth. And so the players that we have unavailable, if we assume Parker's unavailable, we pretty much think Blom's going to be unavailable. You don't have Hebert, you don't have Perez. That's a lot in our spine, the defensive part of our spine that's missing, that we've relied heavily on this year. And so there's two things that I think to that. The first thing is our defense has more or less stayed consistent each match for almost the entire 90. Um, Obviously, Nelson's played all but a few minutes. Nerwitzki's played every
Hmm.
minute of every game. Parker, before he was out, played every minute of every game. Hebert, before he went on international duty, every minute of every game. Leuven, every minute of every game. Blom was getting there before his injury, so you didn't
Right.
see a whole lot of rotation in our defensive posture. I think that's going to be somewhat the same deal now. I would expect Nelson and Nerwinski to go the distance. I would expect Bartlett to go the distance because he did last game as well. So we
Yeah.
know he can. We might have Yarrow and Bell kind of flip flop in the other
Hmm.
center back role. So assuming that uh, Carnell said that Bell can go 90, but at the very least, that could be a sub position. But then you get past that. You get to Leuven, who goes 90, so he's not worried about him. Vasilev, I think he can go the full 90, but he hasn't yet.
Hmm.
That could be another position where you want to see him on the field, because if Indy has to go out, are you going to bring in Akil Watts in the defensive midfield? You
Yeah.
can, but it's thin. Without Blom or Perez, that defensive midfield doesn't. Azeel Jackson, I think, is the only other player who has experience in preseason. It's not a position he had before this year, but he's played it in preseason, so he could be an option there. So that's that Vasilev. But then our attack, that's where I get into it, because
So many options.
we've seen significant rotation in our attack so far every single game, whether it's in the 55th minute, 60th, 70th, 75th, 85th. Just about every single one of those players has subbed out at some point in the game. I don't. Klaus has gone the full 90 a couple times, but all these other players have seen significant rotation. So, what are our options going to be there if those players are gassed early, or even just a little bit earlier than they normally are? Because if you start with a Stroud, an Ostrak, an Alm, and a Klaus, you basically have Celio Pompeu, you have potentially Azeel Jackson, Isak Jensen could be an option if he's healthy, and then up front you have Nico Gioacchini and Sam Adeniran. Like, there are options. Like, you could sub for each one of those players, but to me, there's a drop off in quality if they get gassed early. So you're asking some of the players who may not have played as often or as long as they have so far put in significant minutes if our attacking players get gassed early.
Yeah, but like if you think about what Adeniran has done when he has played, like
Mm-hmm.
he's so quick and he can make a huge impact if he comes for the last 20 minutes. Let's say Klaus is gassed and you still have Adeniran, and maybe you switch to a 4-2-2 and plug in Joaquini also.
Yep.
I think that that could be a good option. We have a lot of options on offense, and you may see a little bit of drop off, but I think from what I have seen, Adenir and Giacchini, Celio, when he has come, he has also played well and made a difference. So I think there are options if somebody needs to come out because they are gassed because of the altitude.
I do think That I like that. I like that thought. I really like the idea of, especially because you mentioned that RSL said that a lot of the goals typically come towards the end of the game when some of the players are gassed. Well, if we can start with Klaus up front and then finish the game with Joaquini and Adeniran in there, that I think provides pressure to the point where RSL is not used to an opposing team able to finish a match as
Mm-hmm.
high pressing, as high octane in their attacking third as we might be able to. And in that sense, we would need to rely more or less on at least one of Stroud, Ostrak, or Alm going the distance or playing a significant near 90 amount. Because
Mm-hmm.
at that point, you're looking at if you start off with those four, if we assume Stroud, Ostrak, Alm, and Klaus, if you sub in Joaquini and Adeniran and then Celio, you got one guy who still needs to run out there, unless you're putting in an Azil Jackson or an Isak Jensen. So guys who haven't seen minutes yet, or significant in Jackson's case for City. But that's kind of your depth. Like you're spent at that point. You're really, really scraping the barrel, so to speak, because you're not leaving anybody not subbed in on the attacking side. Um, and I do think that's where our subs are going to come from. Is
Mm-hmm.
I still see an ability to um, maybe maybe Indy, depending because he hasn't gone 90 yet. Not that he can't,
Right.
but Yarrow and Bell would be another spot, and that will leave us well positioned because I think we'll need those subs more so than we have in the first four games.
Yeah. 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 Never mind. I was gonna ask you about but you said your prediction, so never mind. But yeah, it'll be an interesting game. It'll be interesting to see what the altitude does, and hopefully these late subs will take care of business and bring either 1 point or 3 points.
Well, I mean, if we get just one, um, let's pivot to something else I want to talk about, which is the expectations for this team. So we talked about before the season started, the wooden spoon winner expectations. We talked about how that shifted a little bit on the KTRS part to it's MLS wrap up, the MLS season pass show. There were comments that St. Louis City is now seen as a team that is, at the very worst, a playoff team. There's 9
Hmm.
teams in there. You had the math earlier that you're starting to see it as a much more clear path to, if you sustain anywhere near what we're doing now, then you can see the math adding up to the points that you would typically need to make the playoffs. So I liked in the press conference today that it came up for both Carnell and Edu Leuven about expectations and how they're handling that. What do you think from what you've heard about these different expectations? Do you agree with them, first of all, in that St. Louis City may be seen as at least a playoff team at this point? And are you liking some of the answers that you've heard on how the team is handling that kind of a pressure?
So a playoff team, yes, I think that's realistic. But it's still too early to think, oh, St. Louis is gonna make a deep run in the playoffs. I think it's still early, but yeah, definitely playoff team for sure. Unless there is like a huge drop off in form, but yeah, based on the numbers, I think is attainable. Which would be a success for the team to make it to the playoffs in the first season. And the way the team is taking the expectations, I really like it. They all this time, even before the first match, say no, we're gonna take in one game at the time. It's 34 weeks, 34 games we have to plan for, and after a game ends, we talk about it, look at what went wrong, what we need to do better, but we focus on the next game. And I like that attitude. The team is not thinking about, oh, we're doing great. They just take it one game at a time, plan for it, and don't think about being first in the on the table or having expectation about playoffs. They're very realistic and just think about the next game and go from there.
Yeah, if that's one thing that I really enjoy hearing from Carnell, especially, it's that almost the goldfish mindset, where I really like that quote from Ted Lasso, where it's just be
Yeah.
a goldfish. And I have a calendar that I'm staring at right now where Sam Obisanya is saying that, and I can't help but think about that whenever Bradley Carnell says something like every Monday we reset,
Yeah.
because good or bad, you kind of need that mindset. You
Yeah.
you enjoy what you see from a player perspective. Leuven called it out when I asked him about how he sees those individual accolades and the pressure that comes with that, and the idea of, yes, you appreciate it, you don't let it change anything you're doing, and I think that comes through from the team perspective in how they're handling it. So they're getting more accolades from the national media. They're getting more exposure in the local media as well, because it's a fun team to follow. Who doesn't want to follow a team that's 4-0? They've never lost a match in their history, blah, blah, blah. But from a player perspective, the reason that they've gotten to this point where they're 4-0 is because they've bought into the system and that goldfish mentality. And I see that continuing, not necessarily to the undefeated uh, point, but more so to good or bad. Like, they're not going to allow expectations. They're not going to allow individual results to change anything that they do. And what I'm going to look forward to in that is, how will they handle a bad run of form? Because they've handled a great run of form well. They've continued it, not just a 1 win or 2 win, but they've been able to string together these. What happens if you're having, for whatever reason, whether it's injuries or another international window, whatever ends up happening, maybe at Leagues Cup something happens. How are you going to bounce back from that, from a multi-game perspective? We know they can bounce back mid-game. We know they can come from
Hmm.
behind. But that's kind of the one thing. At this point, I'm looking to things that I haven't seen so far that I expect to come up, because you've got your come from behinds in the game. You've got your winning streaks. You've got your clean sheets out of the way. You have multi-game, like, goal contribution streaks. All these things are happening. We have those notches in our belt, so to speak. But a loss, a losing streak, those are kind of on the horizon at some point. And I don't necessarily expect, at least initially, that to change the overall expectations that have started to shift. Um, MLS pundits seem to be really slow to change in how they approach their power rankings or their teams. I think that's why now, even now, having won 4 games, we still haven't reached the top of anyone's power rankings, which is just that goes to show the how ingrained they are into what their own expectations were, and they're slow to adapt to a changing landscape. Even
Yeah.
though even though this year is different than last year, a lot of the expectations are based on what they had last year or teams going into this year. And I think that now that we're on the flip side of that, it's going to take a little bit of time, if something were to happen, for us to fall from what these new expectations are.
Yeah, but yeah, it's changing. That narrative is changing slowly. Although, yeah, you still see, okay, you still see some articles that say, oh yeah, St. Louis is doing great. But
Mm-hmm.
that I think I read one today or yesterday, like, oh yeah, why St. Louis is doing so great and why it won't last. I think that was the headline.
Ah,
But yeah, it's changing. About a losing streak, I think the team will handle it the same way they are handling this winning streak. And I think that will actually, when it happens, it will be helpful for the team because you need to go through the good and the bad to be successful. So it will happen at some point. Maybe I'm wrong; it won't happen, but yeah, I think that helps you build character and continue building the team. So I think the team will handle it the same way.
were you reading the Backheeled article? Is that from I think it
Yes,
was Joe
that's the one.
Lowry? Yeah,
Yeah,
I actually had that pulled up because I was reading that earlier today, and it starts off saying St. Louis City is an elite MLS team for now. And I liked when I started it about he ate some crow. Joe Lowry for the prediction he had going into the season, how St. Louis would be bottom of the West kind of struggle. And he says clearly,
Mm-hmm.
but I was wrong. The thing that you allude to, though, is the for now. And so Joe Lowry is he's a really good analytical mind, and I enjoy
Mm-hmm.
listening to him analyze the game, and I enjoy his written stuff because it really goes deep and it gets into the nuts and bolts, even that amazes me, to what they're able to pull out from the data. And this particular article, and I'm just going to read it real quick because I think it speaks to some of that what we can look forward to in
Mm-hmm.
why St. Louis isn't being given like a pass at this point, saying, okay, they've won 4 in a row, they're for real, like they can continue this throughout the whole season. So it goes straight into say teams get tired, players get
Mm-hmm.
tired and get hurt. Ball dominant teams get sharper on the ball, limits the pressing effectiveness. And American Soccer Analysis found that every single MLS team was pressing less in July of last season than they were in May of last season. All of them. So if you
Mm-hmm.
expand that analysis to the last 2 years, Second Spectrum's pressing data shows there was a dip in pressing frequency after the opening stages of both 21 and 22. So it's consistent. As good as St. Louis City has been in their press, as revolutionary almost as they've been from an expansion team's perspective, the overall predictions for how that system is going to evolve throughout the season is that it's going to falter. And they've got data to back it up from a pressing perspective. They don't
Mm-hmm.
necessarily have, and I don't mean to sound like St. Louis is a unicorn on this, but they don't have St. Louis style data. Maybe it's like energy drink
Right.
soccer, but it's not St. Louis style soccer data.
Yeah, and
And
that's the thing. Statistically, what he has there, yeah, it makes sense. It's correct, but as you were alluding, like this St. Louis team may not necessarily be that 100% energy drink team, so it may be different, and the team may tweak it a little bit during the summer.
yep,
I'm pretty sure Carnell and his team are already thinking about these things and um, how they will handle the high humidity and high temperatures in
yep.
St. Louis and in other places they go to play around July and August. But
Or
yeah,
it's
he
because
has good.
they did
Yeah,
last year, so they have that experience to
exactly.
draw off of.
Same thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and that to me that speaks to the City Two's effectiveness too. So like
Mm-hmm.
they are a new team to MLS, but they're not a new team in handling the situations that they're going to need to handle. And St. Louis, they I'm trying to remember City Two's exact progression. And yes, there was an infusion of talent in the August timeframe, but from a system perspective, the players didn't necessarily fall off. Like they kept going, and that's how they were able to make the playoffs as that new team with the new system.
Yeah, and there was just going back to the conversation about losing streaks. City Two had a 2-game losing streak, and it was towards the end of the season.
Mhm.
But they bounced back really well and beat the two teams that were maybe it was a 3-game losing streak. But they ended up beating both Tacoma and North Texas, who were two of the teams that beat St. Louis during that losing streak. Um, but yeah, there wasn't a huge drop off in form, and yeah, although there was new talent coming in from the international guys, at the end the bulk of the minutes was the same City Two guys. Even if
Yep.
you inserted Klaus sometimes, Ostrak towards the end of the season, the bulk of it was the City Two guys.
Yeah, you were still carried by the guys who got you there, which shows that they didn't
Hmm.
have the drop off that Joe Lowry and the analysis are expecting City to have so drastically come July or August.
And who knows, maybe come July, August, you may insert a couple of new players too. We still have all that money available, U2 initiative available. So who knows?
I'm impressed that you didn't drop Firmino's name.
Ah, yeah, no, I'm not, and we're not gonna get into this in detail, but I'm gonna go no.
Yeah.
I
You know what's funny? I because we're in the middle of watching it and the new season just came out of Ted Lasso. I might be the only person who's seeing parallels in the storyline of Ted Lasso versus this City Firmino rumors. But isn't that a little on the nose about this team collective and how the system runs everything? And then you look at a $10 million a season player in Firmino coming on, and you're trying to get him, and what that could do to the locker room. And we have yet to see it. But that episode, I mean, spoilers, I guess, to whoever's hasn't caught up on Ted Lasso, but the storyline's starting to
I
develop.
haven't. I haven't.
Uh, okay, I'll stop. I'll stop. There's something on there that is similar to what we're talking about. It's not
Yeah.
in any of the characters we love. It's just a plot point right now.
Hmm.
Fun to track. That I'll move on.
But yeah, the first thing when that Firmino thing came up, the first thing that came to mind for me was the locker room.
Yeah,
Like, you have a good thing going on, just keep it going.
yeah.
And if you have money to invest, at least to me, like, I think it's better to invest in a good under 22 player,
Hmm.
for the future than trying to spend 10 million in Firmino. That's
Yeah,
that's my take.
yeah. The mechanisms that we haven't taken advantage of yet can't be overlooked for that flexibility. But one last note that I was just came to me is when we're talking about tired legs in July and August and how that could play out. The analysis has looked at seasons in which MLS didn't take a break. Right, we're getting a month
It's a
long
good point.
break from season play, from regular season play here. So regardless of what we do in Leagues Cup, I'm not expecting. I would hope that we get out of. It's a tough group. I would hope that we get out of group stage, but 2 of the 3 teams make it out, and we're going against the Columbus Crew and Club America. That's tough, no matter how you
Yeah.
slice it. And so, worst case with Leagues Cup is we get an almost a month long break to regain our fitness, to not have to play in potential significant heat in July and August. The season picks up again in mid August. So
Hmm.
that's groundbreaking in and of itself. That concept of you're not needing to play 4 matches in that kind of a heat. You might get some fresh legs. You might end up playing into Leagues Cup. So I don't know how that's going to play out, but it's an unknown is all I'm getting at. And that hasn't played into any of the statistics or the evolution of how you analyze a high pressing team. It's a curveball that nobody has any idea how it's going to play out, but it's something that is worth mentioning when you talk about how we're going to do and how our press is going to survive later this year.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. That Leagues Cup break is gonna come into play for sure.
All right, Santi, I got one more thing on our agenda to talk about, and that is the soccer capital nonsense that happened this week.
Hey, before we go into that, it looks like we have one more question out there.
Yes. Yes. So Adam Tenhouse says, and this picks up on our convo about rotation going into RSL and how our attackers might fare. He asks, which sub opens their account next? Celio, Adeniran, or Alm? What do you think first?
Well, yeah, I wouldn't consider Alm a sub, but from those three, I'm gonna go with Adeniran. He's gonna come late in the game
It's
against
fair.
RSL and open his account.
It would match up with how you were describing him and how you were describing how teams often score in Salt Lake. So I would not be opposed to that. I already gave away my answer earlier, which was Alm, because I want him to
Right.
score. I have him starting against RSL, and I want him to open his account that way, not as a sub, but I want to see him because he's had some good opportunities. It's not like he hasn't seen and had good chances. He just hasn't
Yeah.
hasn't been able to slip one past. Or I really want to see Klaus facilitate for Alm, because Alm has had some opportunities on the right side, but it just seems like there isn't as much of a connection between Alm and Klaus. And this may be anecdotal or not statistics based, just from the eye test. It doesn't seem like there's as much connection between Alm and Klaus as there is with Klaus and Stroud, for instance. It just seems like
Hmm.
Stroud connects more in that attacking third. Alm, while he's had some chances, is a lot more of a facilitator. He has an assist. He sends the ball in really well, And I just want to see him get more of an opportunity in connection with some of those other players.
Okay.
I mean, obviously, we'd be ecstatic for any one of those three to find net. And if Alm's playing late in the game, I think all three of those players on the field at the same time would be
Mhm.
exciting because I liked Celio on the left side a
Yeah.
whole lot last year with City too.
Yeah. But yeah, I'll be excited if it's Celio scoring. Any of those three guys
How cool! How
will
cool would
be
that be?
exciting. One thing, and you mentioned this earlier, 11 goals, 7 goal scorers. I love to see that. And just going back to City too, like the first few games, we also have a lot of goal scorers. So maybe
Hmm.
it's more of a system thing that you see a lot of players scoring goals. But I like that everybody is contributing.
Yeah, and there's some interesting stats that City put out in to that point in their matchday preview that City's going to look to become just the sixth team in MLS history to open a season with multiple goals in each of the first 5 games. Just the sixth team to do that. First to do it since 2019 with LAFC and the 2019 Toronto FC teams. Every team that was able to do that, each of the previous 5, advanced to the MLS Cup playoffs, and 2 of them advanced to MLS Cup itself. So
Oh
we've
my
got
god.
we've got history on our side when it comes to winning streaks in general, and we have history on our side when it comes to multi-goal games to open the season. There's a lot to look back on positively with that for City.
Wow.
So we've gone. I think we're up to about an hour and a half on the pod, Santi. Let's finish it off with the soccer capital conversation that happened this week because it was a kerfuffle to say the least on social media, and it got people involved that really had no. I didn't even know they were paying attention to that sort of thing. But for anybody who wasn't aware, wasn't looking at like Twitter or whatever other social media it ended up spinning off into, um, there's a podcast that our friends do. The soccer they used to be called Soccer Capital Podcast, and they posted this week they released a press release saying that they were changing the name of their podcast because they had been contacted by lawyers for Sporting Kansas City that the name of their podcast was infringing on a trademark that they held. And then it took me a little bit to realize this was for real because these guys have released press releases before and it's been kind of funny. But they had changed the name of their Twitter handle and their podcast
Right.
already to River City Ramble, which is a good name. But
Mm-hmm.
everybody started to just kind of what is this? What's going on? Like what do you mean they have a infringement claim? And so they released an email that it was redacted from the names, but it was sent by the vice president and general counsel of Sporting Kansas City, as well as this other company, who come to find out is part of the business structure of some of the SKC owners, that said that Sporting Kansas City holds a trademark to the phrase "the soccer capital of America." And they claimed that they wanted to have a conversation with the Soccer Capital podcast guys because their lawyers felt that they were infringing on that "the soccer capital of America" trademark. So before, I don't even necessarily want to get into the merits of who should be the soccer capital, because in a sense there are no, like, it's one of those fun things fans say. It's not like
Yeah.
you can call yourself the soccer capital, but it to me should be based on facts and history and something to hang your hat on. Like the fact that uh, St. Louis Stars account, for instance, went back and found news
Yeah.
clippings from 1911, 1913, the 1930s, 60s, 70s, that outside sources were referencing St. Louis as the soccer capital of America and the soccer capital of the USA. All these things. It's something that is grassroots, it's organic, it's people label you that because of what you've done, not
Mm-hmm.
because you've gone out and trademarked a phrase that you're literally saying, we're taking this, you have to call us this now, we're branding ourselves as this, and nobody else can use it because we've gone through a legal process to do it when nobody else had any inkling that that was something that you should even do.
Yeah. And yeah, that's gonna be a never-ending debate. I even saw some people who don't have a skin in the game, don't even live in Kansas City or St. Louis, claiming it's neither St. Louis near Kansas City. So yeah, you will never get people to agree on which city is the soccer capital of America. But I was, and I don't know. This comes from somebody who didn't study law and is not familiar with trademarks. But I was surprised that Kansas City was able to get that trademark
Yeah.
because it includes like capital and it includes America. So I don't know, like from common, I don't know, like I would think that's that not something that you would be able to trademark, but that's probably
Yeah.
a conversation for a different day. But yeah, and as you said, it's just something that you earn organically, not like, hey, I have it now, so you should call me a soccer capital of America.
Yeah, and I was looking it up on the Patent and Trademark Office website, and it did very clearly say like it doesn't include no claim is made to the exclusive right to use soccer and America apart from the mark as shown, which is as the phrase the soccer capital of America. But
Mm-hmm.
you're totally right that that phrase is an absurd thing for a trademark to be given for, given
Mm-hmm.
the nature of the phrase itself. Like, how would one prove that even is a thing?
Right.
Um, but the thing that my takeaway from it, aside from there's two things, I guess. First, they filed these they filed these sent these letters or threats or however you want to construe them to not just Soccer Capital Podcast. I heard that Arch Apparel in St. Louis received one as well for
Oh.
a scarf that they made. So the This is Silly podcast this week referenced it as well, that they used to make, or they have these scarves that say the soccer capital of America or soccer capital of America. So they received a cease and desist type of letter as well for selling those scarves. And it does two things. So um, first, the sheer fact that they're sending those out is essentially, and I'm not a patent attorney at all. I have friends who are that I haven't talked to yet about this, but I'm far from it. First understanding I have of that is they're defending their trademark. And so if and when a battle comes that somebody challenges your trademark, the fact that you're able to show that you defended your trademark
Mm,
essentially successfully goes in their favor. And so
yeah.
if down the line St. Louis City, I don't know, decides Carolyn Kindle decides we made scarves, I've got one back here. We made scarves like that, the
There you go.
America's soccer capital, and we want to begin selling those again. And she files suit against Sporting Kansas City saying, you can't trademark this. Well, Sporting Kansas City is going to have now something that they fall back on that says we challenged these and they backed off, and we successfully have this trademark, blah blah blah. That's one thing. The other is, and this is I think something that's important for St. Louis fans to remember, is anytime you see Sporting Kansas City use the phrase the soccer capital of America in their branding, in their marketing, on billboards on I-70, on public buses and public transit in Kansas City, you're not seeing some organic people call us this phrase. You're seeing something that the club has taken through the legal process to bestow upon themselves so that nobody else is legally allowed to use that phrase. It's no longer grassroots. It's no longer organic. It's no longer fan driven or something to have fun with in the ethos of American soccer. It is Sporting Kansas City's business side making this a branding, a marketing slogan that is essentially lost all of its meaning now to what it could reference, which is in St. Louis's case, an actual history of the game being kind of popularized in the country, surviving the test of time, Open Cup championships, national team success, all these things that go back a century plus. That's not what Sporting Kansas City is doing with this. It's purely marketing. It's purely business. It is purely a slogan, a branding slogan for them.
Yeah. Yeah. And just the other thing is just the cease and desist like podcast that I don't know, like it's not like they're it's a big threat and it's not like they're making money
Nope.
out of it. Like I don't know, just not
That
necessary.
I can only that's why I go back to they just want to show that they've defended their trademark.
Yeah.
They somehow got that podcast, the Arch Apparel scarf somehow got on their radar, and their lawyers were like, yeah, this is a chance for us. So let's
Mm,
defend this, and so we can't lose it. And so that to me is another reason why you're seeing the branding start to be all over the place with that billboard on I-70. So
right.
people get up in arms because, oh my gosh, this means it. Like, this means that they're the soccer capital. Like, they're putting it out there. Well, they are the only ones who can put it out there now because it's a brand to them. It doesn't mean anything that it used to mean in the sense of how we think of what that could be. We think of like a Portland, a Seattle, a St. Louis, something that like goes to we talk about our history. We talk about the growth of the game, and that's not what this is. And I'm kind of bummed too because I lived in Kansas City for a while.
Hmm.
I used to go to sporting games, Wizards games when I lived there, and I enjoyed sporting Kansas City. I obviously am a St. Louis guy through and through, but I have a history of enjoying what that club built. But it it disheartens me that something that should be a fun a fun organic thing that can be discussed is now just another brand, another marketing tool that they're legally preventing anybody else from even attempting to use. It's
Yeah, the one thing I really liked about all of this was how people reacted and the solidarity with the
yes.
podcast. People changing their Twitter to capital or capital, and even people like people like Taylor Twellman and other people chiming in. I really loved that single post where they had that press release. It got 600,000 views or something like that.
Oh yeah, it did more for them than their standard podcast ever would. Like, it was just
Yeah,
that created an organic growth for them, and
yeah,
I couldn't
yeah.
agree more for you that the support that they saw and the fact that Kansas City is a universal villain in this context and in this discussion, it's not lost on me. It's not lost on anybody who's seeing this. Like, there's coming the big corporation coming after the little guy. Like, that's all it is at the end of the day. And so, Mike, Mason, Chris, like all those guys over there that do that pod, more power to them. I hope this elevates them. I hope, because they're good podcast. I mean, they are a weekly. They've been weekly for a long time. They've produced, I think, close to 100 episodes over the past year and a half, 2 years. So, you know,
And
hope
their
they.
first episode was before this trademark was
Oh yeah,
filed, right?
yeah, that's another. I mean, it's just another absurd wrinkle to that is that their podcast
Wow.
existed before this trademark existed, and
Mm,
so they've spoken out about just the ability to litigate this being a factor, and if they could litigate it, I have a hard time seeing that they wouldn't be successful given they existed
right.
beforehand. But that's me like talking and not playing with real money in the real
Yeah,
world.
it's just
So
a lot of time and resources, and
yeah,
it's understandable that they don't want to go
end
through
of the
that
day,
and just move on, change the name, and
yeah.
continue doing the great work they are doing, you know?
Yeah, end of the day, more exposure, have a cool name, and Sporting Kansas City comes out looking like the villains. And now we have new ammo to throw at them anytime that they use the phrase "the soccer capital of America," which I don't think anybody knew before this that was a trademarked phrase, and that's why it kept popping up all over the place now. So, to me, there's no organicness, there's no grassroots. It's this is a corporate entity slogan, and that's all it is to you. It means nothing.
One thing for sure is that game on May 20th is going to be really interesting, and the fans will be into it.
Oh yeah.
Great. It's going to be a great first derby, classico, whatever you want to call it, between St. Louis City and Sporting KC.
You're going to have some interesting signs. You're going to have some interesting banners. And I wonder if the SKC lawyers will be taking names down after that one, because I have a feeling there's going to be more than a few soccer capital references at that game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right, Santi, anything else you want to add before we head out?
No, no, all All good. Hopefully, I'm wrong with my prediction, and we'll see 5 in a row.
Hey, like we said, if you're not wrong, we still come up with a point on the road, which is, like we said, good for MLS teams. That's still, it would keep the undefeated streak going. We could have fun with it, and I go back to RSL in the sense that it is, if you look at the styles, if you look at the matchups, the history of the past 4 games, things favor us pretty well,
Hmm.
and so there are intangibles that lead into how this might be different. There's some personnel differences. That's going to be the big key to me. Not necessarily how teams have played up until now, but how these personnel changes, how the intangibles um, force differences to how teams have played. But it'll be fun to watch.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
All right. Well, that's all we have for Flyover Footy for this week. My name is Matt Baker with Santiago Beltran. Thanks for joining us, and we'll talk to you later.
See you later.